สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from ค้นพบ Today I want to talk about courage. As I'm sure we all know, the situation in Ukraine right now, the invasion of Ukraine, has led to such a huge tragedy unfolding right before our eyes right now as we speak, leading to a large loss of life, immense human suffering, a humanitarian crisis, a refugee crisis, families being split apart, and people being displaced, having to find new homes in a foreign country, and of course the risk that entails, especially for young children and women. People who are now forced to fight for their lives, to protect their families, to protect their homes and their country. The Ukrainian people has obviously shown such immense courage and bravery that has inspired the globe, leading to so much solidarity from the global community and from Ukraine's neighboring countries like Poland and Romania, which has done so much to help their friend and their fellow humans, neighboring countries. We have Poland and Romania, for example, and many more countries opening their doors, their homes, to welcome these refugees. We have many foreign fighters who have volunteered to join and fight for the cause. And as a matter of fact, even the Russians themselves, the Russians in their own home country, who have stood up to protest against the war, to protest against Putin's war on Ukraine or invasion of Ukraine. That requires so much courage and bravery because Russia is pretty much an authoritarian state, which means that if you stand up against the government, if you stand up to Putin, you're going to face a lot of consequences, which could be very serious. So that requires an immense amount of courage. People, Russians who don't want any part of the conflict, don't want anything to do with war, have no interest in the conflict, have no interest in the war. Ordinary people just like you and me who want to live peaceful lives and get on with their lives, right? So there's so much courage being displayed, so much compassion and love being displayed, solidarity being displayed throughout the globe, despite these tragic times, right? Which brings us to the point: what is courage? Courage is an interesting thing if you think about it, right? Because it's not about not having any fear at all. As a matter of fact, the mark of courage is often the case where we can anticipate that the person who is displaying the courageous act or brave act has immense fear, very high fear, but they still choose to stand up and get over that fear and do it anyway, standing up for what they believe, protecting their families, their loved ones, their homeland, right? And in that sense, we could also say that courage helps us or comes from deep within us, because the power that gives somebody the capability to be courageous in a difficult time often comes in a dynamic where we feel that we are a part of something bigger than ourselves, larger than ourselves. We feel connected or part of something bigger, something more worthy, perhaps. It's not just about you, it's not just about me, it's not just about us as an individual, but it's about something bigger, whether it is protecting your family unit, your loved ones, your country, your homeland, right? Fighting for what you believe to be just. You could say that in order for that to go through somebody's mind, what they're really saying is that I feel that I'm part of something bigger and larger, and I'm therefore willing to sacrifice or put myself on the line in order to protect it. And that's what we call courage. And it's beautiful, right? So in one sense, again, it's not about not having any fear at all. You will have fear, immense fear. Being in a war zone is no small joke, no small thing, for obvious reasons, right? But it is feeling the fear and standing up to it anyways, doing it anyways, overcoming it anyways. It is fighting for something bigger than ourselves, right? But I want to bring this conversation to something that we can all relate to on a daily basis, which I think that there are so many acts of courage that go around in small acts every day all around us, right? That may perhaps go unnoticed or overlooked, and that I'm sure that we all can relate to this to a greater or lesser extent. For example, what would it mean to be courageous when dealing with a toxic coworker? What would it mean to be courageous in dealing with your own anger and overcoming yourself, overcoming your own want for anger or vengeance or revenge or hatred, overcoming yourself? That's also courageous, wouldn't you say? So let's talk about that. In our first example that I want to share, what would it take to be courageous when dealing with a toxic coworker, right? First of all, let's look at the nature of the fear that may come up, right? You may feel discomfort just thinking about it, just thinking about standing up and speaking up against that toxic coworker that is causing havoc in the workplace, right? Just the thought of it alone perhaps scares you because you don't want to be dragged into a bigger conflict because you know that that toxic person is very good at creating drama and making more problems, right? Perhaps it is a fear based on judgment, right? Perhaps we don't want to be confrontational. Nobody wants to be confrontational, perhaps, right? And perhaps we fear that if we stand up to that toxic person, then their selfish and neurotic and manipulative behaviors will manifest even more, and they'll find ways to sneak behind our backs and try to rally other people against us, try to make a bad name out of us, try to accuse us, try to talk behind our backs and accuse us and spread lies or rumors about us, right? So that could be a fear at play, right? Again, judgment, fearing how this will affect your job if you stand up and confront this toxic coworker. Maybe it's a fear of losing other friends and colleagues in the workplace, because if you stand up to this toxic guy, you know very well that they will likely act in manipulative and deceitful ways, right? First of all, recognize those fears and try to bring your attention, focusing your attention inwards. As many gurus I've learned from share this technique. For example, Eckhart Tolle would say, try to anchor your attention within. Because fear is expressed on many levels, right? On a mental level as a thought formation, as Eckhart would say, thought formation. And that becomes an emotion. And perhaps that emotion snowballs into a physical feeling. Maybe your gut feels churned up. You feel nervous. You literally feel it in your body. So anchor your attention inwards. Why is this helpful? What this does is it helps us to gain some perspective, and it helps to teach our mind that these challenging and difficult and discomforting emotions and thoughts and feelings cannot truly harm you or kill you yet. And that teaches you to have some clarity and perspective. So therefore, you are no longer reacting to your thoughts, emotions, and feelings based on fear. But now, on the other hand, you're actually learning to cultivate and develop what we could call coping skills. You are learning to cope with and tolerate these discomforting feelings and emotions, and learning to understand and make new connections that they cannot kill you. Right? These difficult feelings, uncomfortable emotions cannot yet kill you. From that place, you're no longer reacting because you have some perspective on what is going on in your mind. And if you're not reacting, you're not making the emotions worse. Would you agree with me? And from that place, you have a choice to respond positively and do the best with what you've got to solve the problem at hand, to solve the challenge at hand. Realize that if you stand up to that toxic coworker, they will perhaps argue back, label you, judge you, try to frame you, try to demonize you, try to call you names, try to blame you, which is their typical defense mechanism, right? And cope with that, right? Having the perspective to understand that in the end, time will reveal the truth, or that in the end, their own actions will speak for themselves, and our own actions will speak for itself, and people will see the truth eventually, right? Cope with the discomfort in the meanwhile, right? And again, another part that I want to share about courage is oftentimes what helps us to be courageous despite the immense challenge at hand is we feel that we are fighting for something bigger than we are. Now, I want to be very clear that this is not about ideology or not about dogmatic beliefs, right? Nothing to do with that. This is not about fighting because you come from a place of anger. Not about that at all. Not about fighting for revenge. Not about fighting for vengeance. Not about trying to demonize the other person. Not about trying to hate the other person. This is not about that at all. This is just about standing for what's right. Coming from a place of compassion, actually. Because if you understand that that toxic person is likely to be coming from a place of his or her own ignorance and lack of understanding, and therefore their own suffering, it helps you to have some perspective on it, right? And that helps you to build the courage to handle the situation at hand and respond effectively from a place of compassion. Compassion for what? Compassion for yourself, compassion for them, and compassion for your colleagues who deserve a constructive working environment, right? And that you're doing your part to take action to solve the problem in the best way that you can and that you know how. And that's what makes it courageous and beautiful, right? Again, two key things I want to highlight to summarize the points just now is number one, anchor your attention within so that you are essentially teaching yourself that you can cope with it. These difficult emotions, thoughts, feelings of fear, they're not going to kill you yet. And you can be thankful to your mind because you understand that those fears are trying to protect you. But that you understand that it's okay. You've got the skills and resources and capabilities to respond effectively to the situation and to do the best of what you've got, and you choose to do that. And thereby, that's what makes you courageous. Okay? Coping teaches you to be tolerant of the difficult emotions in yourself, to understand that it can't kill you, and therefore to regain clarity and calmness. And from that place, you can respond effectively, calmly, or and or strategically. Okay? And when you feel a sense that you're fighting for something bigger than yourself, right? For example, it may be a small thing, but in a small workplace, but you're still fighting for a cause, right? In some sense, you're fighting for a cause because you're fighting to maintain a peaceful and constructive working environment for you and your colleagues, right? So that could be an example. That could be a motivating and inspiring factor to help you to be courageous in these small situations which we may see or run into once in a while in our daily lives. So I want to share that as food for thought. We can all be courageous in our own ways, in very small things. How about this next idea? Being courageous and overcoming yourself, overcoming your own anger, your own hatred, your own need to label and judge and demonize somebody else who you feel has wronged you or perhaps who you don't like. Right? Isn't that a nice thing to think about? So for example, maybe you've just had a falling out in a relationship. Maybe it's a business relationship, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a romantic relationship, and you've just had a falling out, maybe a heartbreak. Do you notice how your own mind, your own ego, perhaps immediately wants to demonize that person, wants to judge that person, wants to get back at them? How dare they cheat me? How dare he betray me? How dare she steal money from me? How dare he break my heart? Blah, blah, blah. So think about that, right? The anger in yourself, the frustration, the want to seek revenge that may come up. Just watch it mindfully. Don't judge yourself for it. We're all humans after all. Watch those emotions. Watch those desires. Anger, hatred, disappointment, frustration, right? Or anything for that matter. Wanting to seek revenge or vengeance, as I said. And ask yourself, how can you be courageous in this moment of time, right? How can you respond based off compassion and understanding rather than the need for vengeance, which comes from a place of anger and hatred, right? And if you can overcome yourself, isn't that also courageous? Because it means that you have to give up something that is not useful or not beneficial to anybody, right? Because deep down we all know that if you respond because you want revenge or you just hate that person or you're just angry, in one sense you understand, if you're being really honest, that it only serves the ego. So if you can find a place in your heart to calm yourself down, to regain perspective, to take a step back from yourself a little bit, watch your emotions, understand it, calm it down, find a way to transform it. That is an act of courage, because you have to feel and work through these difficult emotions, and that's a difficult thing, which definitely you deserve credit for if you try to do that. Focus on the efforts that you're putting in to being a better version of yourself than you were yesterday. And this also applies to the previous case as well in dealing with a toxic coworker. Focus on the efforts and the good intentions that you're putting in, right? Not just the outcome. Because sometimes we can't control the outcome all the time, correct? But what we can control is how we choose to respond. And focus on that. Give yourself credit for that. Learn to appreciate and value yourself for that. Give yourself a pat on the back that you're learning something new every day. You're growing a sense of depth in yourself, a sense of courage, a sense of bravery, a sense of compassion, and internal strength of mind. Because strength is required to overcome yourself, wouldn't you say? To overcome your own fears. And that's something I think is certainly worth celebrating. So I want to share that in today's video, right? We can all learn to be courageous in every day of our lives. There are many small things that we can always take as an opportunity to practice, right? Somebody wronged you at work. Somebody cut you off in traffic. Somebody cut you in front of the line. Somebody stole some money from you. Somebody lied to you. How can you respond in a courageous way, right? To overcome your own need to respond with anger, hatred, vengeance, revenge, right? Watch those emotions mindfully. Don't judge them. Don't try to suppress them, right? But watch them mindfully and ask yourself, how can you transform them into something more beautiful, such as responding from a place of compassion, right? Which is based on understanding that perhaps the person who wronged you, they did it out of their own ignorance, or perhaps they're doing it because they themselves were not aware, or are selfish, or coming from a place of fear too, right? I'm not justifying their actions, but I'm trying to promote a sense of understanding, and to use this understanding to bring out the courage that is already within you to overcome some part of yourself that deep down you know wants to react in a destructive way, perhaps. Okay, and this is what the journey of self-actualization, self-development means, I think. And the choice may not always be difficult. I certainly understand that. It can be very difficult at times. But isn't that the beauty of the journey, if I may present it that way? Learning to become something bigger than what you were yesterday. And that's the process of growth. And that leads you to become a courageous hero. Okay? I hope this video was valuable for you. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. สวัสดีครับ